The Sonic the Hedgehog series has an enormous amount of characters. But with it having so many characters, it's hard for Sega to give a spotlight to each of the characters so often, thus creating a huge pool of characters that have become forgotten, with the majority of them actually coming from the classic games. And like we talked about in the last video in this series, these two characters are so forgotten that even in Sonic Generations there is a missing poster that is attached to the walls in City Escape, with those two characters being Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel. Now obviously in the last video we did Mighty the Armadillo, so within this video, due to popular request, we're going to be doing his best friend in Ray the Flying Squirrel. And it's a pretty big shame just how little spotlight Ray actually gets, where he even gets less spotlight than his best friend in Mighty. As if you've never played the DLC for Sonic Mania Plus, I'd be surprised if you even really know who Ray really is, which is a huge shame considering just how cool of a design he actually has, as well as his incredible abilities. I think one of my favorite experiences with Sonic Mania is using Ray and just flying throughout the entire stage. It feels extremely broken, but it is just so much fun to do so. But with Ray being so forgotten, I'm going to change that within this video. As thanks to the Sonic community and its modding community, I'm going to see just how many mainline Sonic games I can put Ray the Flying Squirrel in. So without further ado, let's jump into that. And of course, first up is going to be Sonic 1. Now when looking for mods for Ray, there wasn't too much that I was actually looking for, considering just kind of how niche of a character Ray can actually be. I was surprised just to see a mod at all in any of the Sonic games. But if there is multiple choices for Ray, one of the biggest things that I was looking forward to were ones that featured his flying ability. As if you're unaware with his flying ability, if done correctly when you were going up and down to catch some air with him, you can fly for an extreme amount of time. And in my personal opinion, I think it's just one of the most fun experiences in any of the classic games. So adding that into some of the classic games that Ray wasn't featured in was a big thing that I was actually looking for within the classics. And thankfully I was able to find one that did exactly that. Where this mod for Ray in Sonic 1 works very similar to how his gameplay is in Sonic Mania, where he's pretty identical to how Sonic is, he's just going to have that flying ability available to him. Now, one thing that is completely different about him is definitely going to be his sprite. Now, I don't believe that this is from anything and it is a custom sprite made by someone. I will say that I do like the way that he looked in Mania, just a bit more, but within the Sonic 1 mod, he actually feels very fitting for the setting in Sonic 1, where it isn't so detailed. A lot of times when you compare a lot of the classic games, even for Sonic's sprite, you can see as the years just go on that Sonic gets more and more detailed as the years go. So I kind of like when in Sonic 1, sometimes the sprites aren't extremely detailed and just actually fit the setting of the game. And I think this Ray mod actually does a great job at that. But other than that, this Ray mod is extremely well done. You can do just about everything with it and has a bunch of little attention to details, like having the ability to go into the special stages with Ray, having his own goalpost, as well as having his face on the life icon in the bottom left corner. I know those are minor things that you don't really have to put into mods, considering they're characters that are just not even meant to be in these games. But a lot of times when mods kind of come out, a lot of those little attention to details are always things that just kind of grasp my attention. And I'm really glad that this Ray mod was able to do that as well. But moving on to the sequel in Sonic 2. Now with this Ray mod, this is actually the same one that we actually featured in the Mighty video, as this is a mod that attaches both Mighty and Ray into Sonic 2. However, when it comes to Ray, it works very similar to what we just talked about in Sonic 1, as he has all of his flying abilities once again, and works fairly similar to how Sonic does in the game. Now his sprite does look a little bit more detailed, but I will say it is still very fitting for Sonic 2. I would say I personally like the Sonic 1 sprite just a little bit more in my personal opinion, and that could just also be that I kind of prefer Sonic sprite in Sonic 1 versus 2. I don't know if that's a hot take at all, but this Ray mod is very fitting for the setting that is Sonic 2. So I definitely cannot complain about that, as it still does look very good. This also has a bunch of different attention to details once again, like the life icons, special zones, and one of the coolest things that they introduced with Sonic 2 was the introduction to super forms. Now Ray 100% does have a super form that you can unlock in the game after going through all of the special zones. However, within this mod, he does kind of get the good old Sega special, where he doesn't get a unique looking color for a super form, he's just going to glow a little bit lighter in and out, as well as just having some after images and then having the powers that you get when going super, like invincibility, going a little bit faster, and so on and so forth. I don't really know what color I would necessarily want Ray to be if he got his own unique kind of looking super form, but like I've stated in previous videos within this series, I just kind of like when characters change a different color. It just kind of adds to the coolness of actually achieving a super form in a game. Seeing Sonic go from blue to gold was just always such an insane experience to me as a kid. And even now, when he unlocked his new super form in Sonic Frontiers, that was just a mind-blowing experience as a Sonic fan, even though it was just changing the aura around him and his eye color. But all in all, the mod for Sonic 2 with Ray is a really good one at that, and is exactly what I would expect and want from a Ray the Flying Squirrel mod in Sonic 2. Now, when moving on to Sonic CD, I was pretty surprised to find out there's actually quite a few options when it comes to Ray mods, but my personal favorite one being this one here. Now, I will say right off the bat, when it comes to his sprite, it almost feels like his colors are a little bit drowned out, and I don't know if that's to kind of fit with the Sonic CD setting, but I do just kind of prefer some of the other ones that we already talked about. However, one of the best things that the sprite does with a lot of its animations is it's really able to pull out a big part of his personality in the character. You can see within a lot of the animations just how goofy Ray can be as a character, and I really like that this mod is able to capture that within a classic game. But he also just has some really cool looking animations, like his running animation that we see here. This reminds me a lot of the running animations that you see in Sega Sonic, which Sonic, Mighty, and Ray were all featured in, as well as just having a lot of really cool minor options, like having his own life icon, being available in the special stages, which a lot of Sonic CD mods actually don't feature, so I'm glad to see that Ray does, as well as things like having his own goalpost at the end of the stage. The biggest thing that I want to compliment on this mod is just how well they actually did with a lot of the animations for Ray. It was really just a fun time to kind of explore all the different animations that he had, and it's so cool that he's able to get Ray's personality to really shine through within a classic game. A lot of times I feel like it's really hard for characters to kind of express a lot of their personalities without entering cutscenes into the game. But this mod creator just did such an amazing job with Ray that you can really just kind of see his goofy and silly side come out of him in this mod, as well as just staying very true to how Ray actually plays in the classic games, like having his flying ability. So overall, I think the Sonic CD mod for Ray is an incredible one at that. Now, when moving on to Sonic 3, I have a lot of the same things to say that I did about the Sonic CD mod. It's just kind of a mix of that mod alongside his appearance in Sonic Mania, where his sprite looks really good in this, as well as him sharing a lot of different animations from Mania, as well as having some custom ones, where once again it did a great job of just kind of expressing how his personality is, as well as still having his flying ability once again, which makes me so happy to know that all of the classic games have that ability to mod Ray into the game with that flying ability. I know I've said it a few times, but it is just truly the highlight of playing as Ray. And of course, one of the main things about Sonic 3 that everybody loves to talk about is going to be the introduction of Hypersonic, as well as still being able to go into Supersonic. Now, you still absolutely have that ability to go into those super forms with Ray. However, once again, it isn't anything super special, as the mod creator just decided to basically make it similar to Mania, where he's just going to flash those colors in and out, with just sharing the abilities that Supersonic has of invincibility, going faster, as well as adding after images. I'm glad that there is a capability to go into these super forms and still maintain Ray, but it obviously isn't anything like super crazy when it comes to like changing colors or anything like that. And like I said, I don't really even know what I'd really want. Maybe like a light green color would maybe look cool on him. I kind of like the way that they did it in the Archie comics. I don't know if it's just because he's standing on the Master Emerald, but it almost kind of looks like he has a slight kind of green tint to him, as well as just kind of having his fur just be a little bit more spiky. I don't know if it's just me, but in a way he's kind of like Mountain Dew colored in my opinion. And I actually don't really mind it for Ray as a super form for him. I don't think super forms need to necessarily be a crazy different color, like you don't need to make him purple or anything like that, but just a little bit of a change is always kind of, you know, appreciated from a lot of Sonic fans, including myself. But this is by far one of the most well done mods that we'll talk about within this video. Everything is extremely well polished, with having some great animations, sprite work, and a bunch of different minor details that you can play around with in the settings of the game. But when transitioning over to 3D, I was actually a little disappointed, as within the first game of Sonic Adventure, there actually is no Ray the Flying Squirrel mod available to us, which was pretty surprising to see. I wasn't super confident that there was going to be a Ray over Sonic mod, but I was pretty confident that we were going to see a Ray over Tails mod. I feel like it'd be the perfect character swap for Tails in his story of Sonic Adventure. It looks like there has been a few requests here and there on Gamebanana, but nobody has actually ever done it. Hopefully in the future we will see Ray in some capacity in Sonic Adventure, but for the time being, unfortunately, this is going to be our first game that Ray is not available in. However, when moving on to the sequel in Sonic Adventure 2, there is a Ray mod available to us. It's about the only Ray mod that I could find for Adventure 2, but it's still a pretty good one at that. What's really cool is this actually takes a lot of things off of the Better Miles mod, where this essentially just allows you to do a lot of different things with Tails in the game, like getting out of his mech in stages, or going back into it, or even just flying around with it. But this completely replaces Ray over Tails in the game, where you can run around and fly around with Ray on foot, where he actually looks pretty damn good, having more of a classic look to him. Or if you want to be more of a traditional kind of gameplay-wise for Tails, you can actually hop him into a pink-looking mech for him. Ray being in a mech does kind of look a little bit goofy just as a character. I don't think he would ever use a mech, but it's really cool to see that there is a lot of options for us. And if you end up using the character swapper mod, you can actually use Ray through the entirety of Sonic Adventure 2, as this mod really allows you to be able to complete all of the stages, allowing you to go in and out of the mech. But not only that, he just has a lot of really cool looking animations for a 3D game. His running animation looks really good and fitting for Ray, as well as his flying animation that we have available to us. And I think it really is just kind of the icing on top of the cake with them partnering up the Better Miles mod with it, as it just makes it so much better of an experience to actually play with Ray in this game. But when moving on to the team game of Sonic Heroes, this is also going to be the same mod that we actually featured in the Mighty video. As to be fair, they usually come as a pair, so it's great to see them come as a pair once again in this mod for Sonic Heroes. Where in this mod, this is going to take Ray and replace him over Tails, and take Mighty and replace him over Sonic. Now, for the most part, their animations and everything like that are just identical to how the characters are in the game. There isn't anything super special about that. But I do really like just seeing Mighty and Ray in Sonic Heroes, as I think they were characters that were definitely deserving to be in the game and were intended to be in development. I know I mentioned it in the Mighty video, but Mighty and Ray were actually meant to be on a team with Metal Sonic when it came to development for the game when they were deciding teams. I think that Mighty and Ray's future would have looked a lot different if they were actually within Heroes. And honestly, if we do ever get kind of a treatment like Sonic Heroes 2 in more of a modern setting, I would love for these two characters to be part of a team. I don't know who you would necessarily partner them up with when it comes to a third person on their team. You could do something like Heavy or Bomb, but honestly just seeing the two of them in a more modern Sonic game would be such a cool idea. But for the Sonic Heroes mod, I think that Mighty and Ray do actually look really good when it comes to the model, and they look really fitting for the Heroes setting. It's just when it comes to like custom animations or anything like that, they don't have anything special to them, and they don't really need to. Sonic and Tails animations on both of the characters look just fine in my personal opinion. But moving on to Shadow the Hedgehog. We're the single modder once again that has been creating just about every mod that I have featured for Shadow the Hedgehog in this series, has also created a Mighty and Ray one that we also talked about in the previous video. Now Ray has a bunch of really cool looking models available to him in this mod, and he actually ends up using a model for Ray that looks very fitting for the Shadow the Hedgehog setting. Just to kind of go through all the different costume options, you have normal Ray, you have more of a modern looking Ray that is based off of his Archie comic look, which I've always been a really big fan of. I love the scarf as well as the goggles on top of his head. You also have a Jet Set styled Ray, where you have one with skates and without them. I personally love the one with skates. You also have a bunch of different options when it comes to Ray Android. Like I said before, I think it's just really cool to see some characters get the Shadow Android treatment, and I think Ray's actually look really cool. It also looks like there is a silhouette option for Ray as well. Now, as well with all of these options when it comes to costumes for Ray, he also does have a super form as well. Looks pretty similar for the most part to how he just traditionally looks. He just kind of has more of that Pearl kind of super look that Shadow has in the game, as well as giving him red eyes. I think this fits totally fine for Ray, and it's really cool just to see a really cool looking super form available to him. I think it's crazy that this modder not only is adding so many different characters into the game, but giving them a bunch of different costume options is such a cool thing to see that is available to us to enjoy. Now, while we've had a pretty good hot streak of having Ray available to us in a lot of games, unfortunately this is where we're going to go a little bit cold. As in Sonic 06 as well as the storybook games of Sonic and the Secret Rings and Black Knight, there is no Ray the Flying Squirrel mod available to us. 3 games that just honestly don't really have that many mod creators behind them, but have kind of seen a surge of popularity within some of those games with them adding a lot of mods, so we could potentially see something for Ray in the future. I just don't think it will be a long time until we get that. And there's a lot of characters that are deserving of mods in these games. I personally really hope that Sonic Project 06, when the final release eventually comes out of having all of the boss fights as well as all the stories available to us, I hope that we kind of see a surge of the modding community kind of come up and mod a bunch of different characters into the game. And who knows, we could potentially see Ray as one of those in the future. But for the time being, those 3 games unfortunately do not have a mod available to him. However, when moving on to Sonic Unleashed, we once again have an amazing mod available to us. Now, as I featured in a lot of these videos for Sonic Unleashed, as there is a mod that is called the Playable Sonic Broadcast mod that just mods a bunch of different Sonic characters available to us in the game. And of course, one of those characters is going to be Ray. Now, the biggest thing that I will say right away is I just love how good Ray actually looks in this mod. And I also really like that they decided to use his Archie design as well. Like I said, I love the goggles and the scarf, as well as just kind of the blue cuffs around him when it comes to his wrists. I think it's just a super fitting design when it comes to like a modern Ray design, and I like that this mod actually used it. I also really like that within the mod, they're able to kind of keep him kind of that shorter height. A lot of mods, you kind of see some of the characters just kind of get stretched out just because they're trying to fit Sonic's skeleton in the mod. Within this one, Ray is actually still pretty damn short, which I really like that it kind of stays faithful to his true height. I also really like that there's a bunch of different custom animations for this mod as well, with the most notable one being his running animation, where we can kind of see his arms to the side. This is kind of similar to what we see for a running animation with Mighty in a lot of games, but I still think it's really fitting for Ray. And I think that goes for most things in the series. Stuff that fits on Mighty also kind of fits on Ray, as they're kind of always attached by the hip, similar to how Sonic and Tails are. There are definitely some things that each of them kind of have unique to them, but I think if they share a lot of things, that's totally fine. Now, this doesn't give you anything like a whole flying ability with him, as he does stay pretty faithful to how Sonic operates in Unleashed in the daytime stages, but I think that's totally fine for Ray, and this is truly a great mod available to us in Unleashed. Now, unfortunately, there isn't anything available to us in the nighttime stages, which is kind of no surprise, but maybe in the future we'll get something for Ray the Squirrel. I think that's what you would call it. But when moving on to the next boost game in Sonic Generations, there's actually a pretty good modern Ray mod over modern Sonic. However, when it comes to classic Sonic, there unfortunately isn't anything available to us for Ray. I was kind of hoping there was, because then you could kind of pair modern Archie Ray with classic Ray. And you know, obviously Ray is obviously a big part to play in the classic games, but I'm still very happy that there is such a good modern Ray mod available to us. Where once again, like the Unleashed mod, he has his Archie look, which I'm going to say it again, I just love the design for, and I wish that Sega would actually use this in a modern game. But for the most part, he works pretty similar to Sonic, with sharing a lot of his animations and gameplay. But there is two things that are pretty different about him. The first being, whenever you air boost with him, you'll notice that he'll kind of go into his flying kind of pose, and you will just go in a straight line for as long as you want. You can't go up and down like you can in the classic games with him, but he will go as long as you want him to and fly throughout the stage. So if you get at a good height in modern stages, he will actually fly endlessly, which is really cool. And you can also notice the same exact pose whenever you kind of jump up in the air and let him fall down. He'll actually kind of slowly glide down as well. I really love that attention to detail with him. And being that this mod is actually 11 years old now, I'm pretty surprised to see that there was a gameplay change about him. And it's still a mod that definitely holds up extremely well in my opinion. And when it comes to kind of, you know, old school type of mods for Sonic Generations, this is definitely one of my favorites. But moving on to the next game in Sonic Lost World. I feel like it's getting repetitive me of saying this, but I'm always surprised just how good the modding scene was for Sonic Lost World, and still is. But there is a Ray mod that is available to us that once again takes his modern Archie look and puts it over Sonic. And for the most part, this is just kind of a model swap in Sonic Lost World, but it does look pretty good. He looks really detailed and good looking. The only thing I will say is, kind of like I was explaining a little bit before, is a lot of times they'll slap models onto Sonic and it makes their skeleton look a little stretched. Ray definitely looks a little bit taller than he actually should be, but that's okay. Just having Ray available to us in a Sonic Lost World mod is pretty crazy at that. But besides that, the only thing that's super different about him is just kind of that they changed his jump ball to yellow to match with Ray. But for a Sonic Lost World mod, it's put together pretty damn well in my opinion. But on to the next game in Sonic Mania. And I know, I can't believe it either, we're actually to a game where Ray the Flying Squirrel was a playable character in, being his only mainline appearance for the Sonic series. And even that's kind of a stretch considering that he is actually DLC a part of the game. He wasn't part of the actual main game. However, Ray, in my personal opinion, is one of the most fun characters to play inside of Sonic Mania Plus. Like I've said already, his flying ability is just so much fun. He looks incredible in the game. The sprite work and animations that they did for him was such a good job done by Sega. And I love just seeing Mighty and Ray both getting really good treatment in this game. Now, the only mod that I really ever kind of sometimes use on Ray is just going to be the Better Super Forms mod. This doesn't change too much when it comes to look for Ray. It just kind of makes him a lighter yellow color. Kind of reminds me of the way that Shadow looks in a way, when it comes to color at least. But it also changes his eye color to purple. I don't know how much that's fitting for him, but that isn't really the reason why I use that, is because of the look of it. It just gives him a few different abilities when it comes to his gameplay option, where he can basically just fly throughout the entire stage. Ray himself can already fly, but I feel like just letting him endlessly fly in his super form is pretty fitting for his super form. It is extremely broken as you can just blitz through the stage like crazy with him, but I feel like if Ray actually did somehow harness the power of the 7 Chaos Emeralds, he would be pretty busted in a game. So this kind of gives us a glimpse of what that would look like. But on to the game that is connected with it in Sonic Forces. Now, it's pretty limited to what you can do with Ray when it comes to the modding scene for Sonic Forces, as the modding scene for Sonic Forces is pretty non-existent. At least now, it was fairly active back when the game first came out on PC. However, there is a mod that basically replaces Ray the Flying Squirrel over the custom avatar of the game. He isn't anything super special. It does kind of take his classic look instead of his modern look, and he does look a little bit stretched out. But it is really cool if you end up partnering this up with the Mighty mod that replaces Sonic. You can run through an entire stage as Mighty and Ray. And I think that's kind of the whole purpose of why this mod was created, to do that exact thing. It is just kind of a simple model swap. It doesn't really give us anything special when it comes to animations for Ray, but I'm glad that there actually is some type of mod for him in the game. Or if you just kind of simply want to have a squirrel race, or an option to pick for your custom avatar, there is an option for that as well. As I really like that there's a bunch of different mobs that add different animals, with squirrels being one of them that you can add into the game thanks to modding. If we ever get the custom avatar again, I hope that they add a bunch of different animals for us to choose from, and squirrel would be a really cool one. But unfortunately, it's time for me to say that's it. When it comes to a lot of more modern games for Sonic, Ray just doesn't have a lot of mods available to him. As in Sonic Colors, Frontiers, Superstars, and Shadow Generations, there was no mods that I could find to put Ray in the game to any capacity. Now, it could definitely just be that these games are fairly newer compared to the other ones that we covered in this video, or simply being that Ray is just still becoming more and more of a forgotten character. As like I said, if you've never played Sonic Mania Plus, you might not have ever experienced Ray in any way, which is a huge shame in my opinion. Ray is such a cool character alongside Mighty, and I think these two characters really need some more spotlight in the future, and I hate the whole idea of just kind of keeping certain characters exclusive to the classic games. Mighty and Ray really just need to escape that whole idea and just be put into the modern games. They tried with the Archie comics, and I really think that they should try again in the future for games. If they ever decide to make another game where there are multiple playable characters in the game, I would personally really like to see Mighty and Ray kind of escape that, or even just kind of be a side story within that game. You just want to make them a side mission where Sonic just kind of meets up with them again after a couple years, I'd totally be fine with that. I have always just been such a huge fan of these two characters, and I think it's a really huge shame that Sega has not utilized them more, considering just how popular of characters these two are. You can't have one without the other. If you have Ray, you can't leave out Mighty. If you have Mighty, you can't leave out Ray. But thank you guys once again on the support for this series. You guys seem to really like the Mighty video, and it was very highly demanded that Ray was the next character that I do in this video. Let me know who you guys want to see next in this series. I've been seeing quite a few different options like Scourge, Jet the Hawk, Mephiles the Dark, and many, many more. I love the suggestions, so keep them coming, as this series is just truly just a bunch of fun to make. As well as just show off just how crazy creative and talented the Sonic community can be when it comes to mods. I think that's one of the best parts about this series, is just kind of getting some more spotlight on some really good looking mods, even if they're older ones. But with all that being said, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!